thought, talking a big game on cost of living, that was put back at the Prime Minister today as well by the opposition leader.
Yeah, and I think he kind of muffed this first question in question time, Peter Dutton. He tried... it's a bit like us as interviewers sometimes. We'll go for a two-part question, particularly in a press conference. Often doesn't work. You've either got to do one or the other. Have a listen.
Prime Minister, prior to the last election, Labor promised a $275 cut to power bills on nearly 100 occasions. Since the election, you've never mentioned it. Last week, the government promised a return to industry-wide bargaining, which will mean more strikes, and it will drive up the costs of living for families in our country. Why are Australian families paying the price for the Prime Minister's new priorities?
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his questions, spraying across a range of issues because they can't decide which tactic to land on.
Both sides since the election, there's been a real sense that they're trying to find their feet in the parliament and gradually sort of going a bit hard one day and then testing a few lines. And today it seemed to me some of the first real engagements of question time since the election. You know, for a cliche, the gloves were off, so to speak.
Yeah, and I thought the opposition were a bit stronger, but they had more to work with, such as our revelations on the shares, such as Tony Burke's letter to the Fair Work Commission, which seemed to be about stopping the rail union, the New South Wales government taking action against the rail union to prevent strikes. So there was a bit more to work with. But interesting here, this Peter Dutton accuses Anthony Albanese of lying over his power bill reduction promise. And it was clever in a way how Dutton withdrew. He had to withdraw properly eventually. But it was a real sort of, you're a bastard, and then someone says, you can't say that, and then he sort of says, I'm sorry, you're a bastard. Have a listen.
Order. The Leader of the Opposition has made his point of order, which I heard in silence.
Can I ask you to withdraw that last comment?
The Prime Minister has asked the Leader of the Opposition to withdraw a comment. I didn't hear the comment, but I'll ask him to withdraw.
The comment was he lied to people, and I'm happy to withdraw.
Big focus today, understandably, on the Jobs Summit from the government side of things, talking up the cooperation, the collaboration at the summit. From the opposition side of the fence, all about the union thugs.
Yeah, the CFMEU in particular, and I guess the government had to invite them, and the person they invited from there, I guess, hasn't got the best reputation around the joint. And we saw Peter Dutton do this in question times previously, where he attacked the Labor links to the CFMEU, the donations, the shutting down of the Australian Building and Construction Commission. So they took advantage of this appearance of Christy Kane, his name is, from the CFMEU at the Job Summit.
My question is to the Prime Minister, and I refer to the Prime Minister's captain's call to invite CFMEU boss Christy Kane to his union talkfest. Mr Kane has previously been charged with common assault, has described John Setka as one of the most fair dinkum people in this country, and on Thursday said, if you're not at the table, you're part of the menu. Will the Prime Minister apologise for inviting this misogynist thug, or was it payback for millions in dirty CFMEU donations?
I thank the Deputy Leader of the Opposition for her question about the fact that there were trade unionists at the Jobs and Skills Summit.
All of those unionists who were there had a legitimate reason to be there, are good people. This question is about the thugs at the CFMEU that go around breaking arms, go around with all sorts of misogynistic behaviour.
And here's an example of Christy Kane speaking. He's not a fan of Peter Dutton on the Thursday evening of the summit last week.
Regardless of what I think of a Liberal government, I'll say this. It's an old saying. If you're not at the table, you're part of the menu. And so, Mr Dutton, you're not here. And you've had plenty to say about me and my union. And you couldn't even come to this conference.
Yeah, you're part of the menu. I wonder if haggis would be on the menu with Christy Kane. There's the old... I
was hoping you'd say it.
Yeah, no, indeed. During the last term of government, you and I spoke a lot about Chalmers and Frydenberg and this... They went head-to-head so often in question time. It was quite good theatre. looks like that rivalry continues to some extent, with Jim Chalmers at least throwing a few cracks Angus Taylor's way.
Yeah, and the seniority's changed, hasn't it? So Frydenberg didn't show Chalmers enough respect, and you can see here that Chalmers is showing his shadow counterpart, Angus Taylor, no respect.
Now, I understand, Mr Speaker, that when the Shadow Treasurer demanded an invite to the Jobs and Skills Summit, I know that it was humiliating for him when Mum and Dad said he couldn't go to the forum. I know that it was humiliating for them, but that doesn't excuse the kinds of rubbish questions which attempt to kind of whitewash and gloss over the fact that those opposite were responsible for a decade of stagnant wages. If you lot had your way, we'd have another decade of wage stagnation and ordinary Australian working people copping it in the neck.
Jim Chalmers there firing up a little. As I said, it was more of that traditional engagement in question time. I think they've all settled into their respective roles, and
so much for the new parliament, maybe.
So much for the new parliament.
Culture in the new parliament. That was pretty nasty, wasn't it?
The government's got a bit of a boost with the news poll, that's for sure. But still, let's stick with the difficulties that they're facing, because it's not just on the share issue. Tony Burke's had to answer some questions as well in relation to a letter he sent to the workplace watchdog.
I don't think you should have sent this letter, Tony Burke. I think it's as simple as that. It looks bad. Looks like you're trying to influence them over the rail strike, which is obviously a hot button issue at the moment. We reported on this yesterday. He wrote to the Fair Work Commission saying employers shouldn't be able to force unions out of enterprise bargaining agreements. And that's what Perrottet threatened to do to the rail union. So he fired up a bit answering this in question time. He denies that letter was about the rail union, Tony Burke, and he says they're changing the law anyway.
Can the minister explain to the House why he has intervened in the New South Wales rail dispute in support of unions and further strikes?
It's not unusual for ministers for workplace relations to write to the Fair Work Commission. Not unusual at all. Not unusual for them to write to the Fair Work Commission in order to update the Fair Work Commission on what's happening with legislation.
Tony Burke there on that letter to the Fair Work Commission. Now, the government and he also having to explain the other agreement that was reached, at least by some business representatives and the unions, on multi-employer bargaining.
Yes, Kieran, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was questioned again this morning on radio about whether his new multi-employer bargaining is compulsory or opt-in, and he couldn't answer.
We don't seek to impose changes. What we seek to is to have discussions.
Business is already saying if it's compulsory, that's a red line issue. So that's why I'm asking the compulsory question.
Lots of people are saying lots of things, Patricia, and they'll continue to do so. That's the way that bargaining works in our system, Patricia. You have lots of statements made, and when you actually cut down to what the detail is, it's possible to get agreement. We will work through those issues.